Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I painted the Gundabad Catapult Troll, and in this video we're going to be focusing on the troll itself. What a massive big unit that was released last year, and I was very excited to start painting it, but also afraid. You know, when you're painting a big model, for example when I painted Smaug, you want to do it right. It's way too expensive to mess it up, so I'm always kind of scared to start painting it, but making these kind of videos kind of forces me to do so anyway, so thank you so much for that. In this video we're going to be focusing on the troll itself, and I'm going to show you how I approached it. There's a lot of dry brushing in there, there are some different techniques that I'm using, so please just take out of it what you need, and I'd love to hear from you, of course, so if you have any use of this video, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and consider following me on this channel as I'll be making a lot more videos like this. So without any further ado, let's get started on that troll. So this for me was the biggest challenge to paint, because you want it to be neat, you want it to be cool, but it's a large surface and you want to have a lot of detail. So to start, I am going to base coat my model. I assembled it to the base, which in retrospect was maybe not the brightest idea, because there are some hard to reach surfaces around the belly area that are, well, the big base is really in the way. But I glued it together, so I made it work. I used my airbrush with a mixture of Nightlord's Blue and Abaddon Black, but you can use a regular brush as well, but this is a lot quicker. So once dried, you get something like this. It doesn't really look good, but it has a base coat, and we're going to start from there. Now I'm using a large dry brush and some dark Reaper to add some color there. Now using my light, this might reflect a bit more than I'd like to, but you get the idea. The dark Reaper, I'm covering all over the body, focusing mainly on the outside because the inside has softer skin tones, and we're going to do that later on. This way the dark areas in between, they stay nice and dark. And I'm now repeating the process with Thunderhawk Blue, which is just a tiny step brighter. A little bit more color in there, a bit more bluish, bright blue. And for the back of the legs, we're going to dirty them up a little bit with some Steel Legion Drab. It's not really a flesh tone, but a tiny bit of softer skin, and that way you get a nice variation in colors in there. I'm doing the same for the elbows. A little bit around the knuckles, some tiny bit around the neck, just to have some color variation. And this is what it looks like at this point. Then for the chest, we're starting dark. Doomble brown, also on the biceps, the front part of the arms, a little bit beneath the chin, and the entire chest and belly. I'm starting with a dark tone and build up my colors from there, so I'm going brighter and brighter. Now when using this dark undertone, it's okay to go into those grooves, into those deeper areas, so really brush your paint in there. Be careful around the part where you want to have a transition, don't go too heavy there, but in the middle you can go very heavy. Next, Baneblade Brown, the exact same technique, except this time we are going to brush it a bit more lightly, so that the darker undertone is still a little bit visible in between. Now I'm also taking part of the face with me, the belly over here, and I'm doing the same process once more with the rock art flesh, going from darker to bright every step we take. It's nice to leave some of that dark shining through, so you get a tiny transition, not too much, of those different colors. I'm covering the front of the face, focusing mainly on the lowest parts, so below the eyelids, the chin, the upper lip, a bit of the nose. And it's difficult to position the separation of colors, so where are you going from bright to dark. And if you think you've gone too far like I did here on the side, just take some dark Reaper and kind of do the opposite dry brush. So from the brighter to the darker part, and get your transition at the exact point you want it. This is also a nice way to kind of blend those colors together. So the darker and the bright. You don't go over the bright in the middle, but the edges is okay. You get a nice transition there. Next, with some Ushabti bone, I'm repeating the process once more for the brightest parts, so focusing on about the middle 70%. The belly is a bit hard to reach because I glued the base already, so that would have been easier if it weren't stuck. But this way it's easier to place your model. Once we're done with the bright colors, I'm covering the entire bright part with Seraphim Sepia. And the reason I'm doing this is just to bring in a little bit more yellow, some yellow tones, making it a bit warmer than it was. Also covering those cracks with a bit of darkness once more. And once that is done, I'm repeating the last step with the Ushabti bone once more. And that's it for the bright skin parts. Now for the fun part. I'm mixing some Pharisian Grey with Thunderhawk Blue to create a highlight, and I'm covering every single scale, edge highlighting it, making it a single item just to make it pop out a bit more and leave those darker areas in between. So this is just a tiny detail that really works to make this model a believable troll, an actual presence. You want those tiny details to pop out, because these larger minis, they are very easy to cover with a single coat of paint, but it's these kind of details that really make them special. This is extremely time consuming. I think I spent about an hour doing this, but the result is really well worth it. I'm doing the same thing around the face area, picking out some of those details. And we're not done yet, because once you have covered the entire model, I'm doing the exact same thing once more with pure Fenrisian Grey, but now only focusing on the top parts. So the top part of the scale, the part that will reflect the most light, some extreme edge highlights, as you can see. So we're kind of building this up, but it really gives a beautiful end result. Now I wanted the insides to be a bit darker, so I took some Drakenhof Nightshade and tried to paint in between, so just the cracks. It's not a big deal if you accidentally hit part of the model. And for the head, which is a large smooth surface, most of it, it's a great way of adding some color. Don't forget those parts in between the toes, the toenails here. Just a nice way to darken those up as well. And I'm adding some fine line between the nails and the skin. Alright, now it's time to add some pink to the lips. Emperor's Children I use, and a large dry brush to kind of slap that on. Focus on the lower part of the upper lip and the upper part of the lower lip. Now I'm doing a wash around the eyelids. I went a bit too heavy, as you could see, but dry your brush and just kind of pick up the paint again and go over it. Give it like 2-3 layers until you get the color you want. I just wanted to have a slight pinkish look in those eyes, something like this, just as a variation on the skin tone we already painted. I think those eyes really work. You got the nice bright eyelids, the pinkish around the eyes. And now to finish it off, I'm using Palette Witch Flash to create a very, very tiny edge highlight on all those cracks, all those tiny parts. to just give it a little bit more sharpness. Don't overdo it, because this is just to emphasize the tiny details, the cracks in the lips, etc. Thin down your paint quite a bit, you get a very nice result. For the inside of the mouth, I'm using Baragnar Burgundy. I'm covering the entire inside, including the tongue and the sides of his mouth. But of course, we kind of have to blend that with the natural skin tone on the outside. So we're going to do that later on. Pick out those teeth with some Ushabti bone. Now, it shouldn't be too big of a problem with this big model. When painting those tiny Lord of the Rings miniatures, the teeth are an extreme challenge. You're painting like 2.5 centimeters high figures, so imagine the size of the teeth. This is easy. Don't forget the nails, the toenails and the fingernails. I'm painting them in the exact same color. And you get something like this. The fingernails on the back here. Yeah. Once done, I'm washing it with some Seraphim Sepia. Again, to add some yellowness and, of course, cover all those cracks, get some nice shades in there. Now make sure to let that dry, and after which we're covering about 70% again with some Ushabti bone. So I want some nice dark edge where the teeth hit the gums, but the rest I want to be nice and bright. You can take it one step further, for example with some Screaming Skull or adding some Palette Witch Flesh to create some extra sharpness to the bottom part of the teeth. With some Dark Reaper, I'm painting the inside of the cheek and kind of blending the red and gray to one color. Next step for the inside and the gums is Screamer Pink. I'm painting the outside of the gums, leaving some dark in the middle. I'm focusing only on those parts where the teeth are situated, and also painting the tongue in this color. Next, I'm repeating this process with Emperor's Children. Again, focusing on a tiny edge highlight around those teeth, and I'm stippling this color on the upper part of the tongue. I'm using a stipple effect as it's quite a hard place to dry brush, and when stippling you get some structure in there like a tongue would normally have. Then with some Agrax Earthshade I'm adding a very subtle line of darkness as a separation between the lip and the gums. You can also add some extra darkness to the nails if you want. I focused here on the top part of the nails and darkened them a bit down to create some extra grooves in there. Then with Palette Witch Flesh I'm painting in the eyes. Now these eyes are quite big as in comparison to the normal miniatures, but still it's a tiny piece to paint and you don't want to mess it up. I also used Palette Witch Flesh to create a very subtle glaze to the eyelid, making it a bit white as well. Thin down your paint when doing so. Next with Tactless Blue I'm painting in the blue pupil of this troll. What I love about this troll is, even though it's a dark, mean character in the movies and in the game, you can still have bright blue eyes, making him look kind of friendly even. Now inside that blue we're painting a black pupil. And of course make sure that he is looking in the direction you want him to look. I wanted to give the inside of the eyes a tiny bit of extra color, so I used Berserker Bloodshade to add some hue of red, some tiny subtle red effect in there, making the skin look a bit softer, and yeah, just adding some color overall. Alright, and then it's heavy metal time. I'm using Iron Warriors to paint the entire armor of his armor. Is that a word? I think it is now. His armor. The large spikes, they look very intimidating. I like Iron Warriors, in this case a bit more than Leadbelcher, for example, because this is a tiny bit darker and it's not too shiny. Now once done we have something like this. But that is way too clean, so we're gonna dirty it up. And for that we're using Agrax Earthshade. Just slap that on randomly, or maybe even cover most of it. Leave some of those shiny parts nice and bright, but the rest can go dirty and dark. It gives it a nice rusty effect. Now to add some sharpness I'm using Runefang Steel and focus on those very edges. There's a ton of edges here, the spikes on the side, the spikes on the front, the sharpness on the corners. So take your time and pick out every one of those nice details. And when you're done with the edge highlighting, of course, this metal is never this clean. It's been used. He's punched a lot of guys and rocks and whatever. So I'm using a large dry brush and kind of stipple that same Runefang Steel on it, just to give it an uneven, worn look. Don't overdo it, don't dip your brush in paint, wipe off most of it and kind of go over it. I think I went over it about 10 times even. Once that is done, I'm adding Nuln Oil to darken them down and get some nice shading in there. And you also kind of blend those previous colors together. Now once this is done, we're starting on the belts and straps. I'm using pure Abaddon Black to paint all those large belts going around his body, holding the catapult on his back. It's going to be a nice dark, or actually black leather look. So it can be shiny, which it is when using Abaddon Black. It's a beautiful result already. So I went all around, but there are a ton of details in those straps as well. And the first thing we're going to do is add some edge highlights. And for that I'm using Dawnstone. Every single edge I'm covering with this Dawnstone color, just to give it some sharpness, some worn effect. Now there are some metal bolts in there, and for that I'm using Leadbelcher. Put some drop upon your brush and just stipple it, like so. Just touch those tiny bolts, which is more than enough. Now, of course, these straps are held together by some tiny pieces of string. I'm guessing it's stronger than that. And for that I'm using a Shapti bone. Now the Ushabti bone alone is way too bright, so I'm going to be shading that later on. And to shade it, I'm using Seraphim Sepia. As you can see, I missed the right shoulder stitches, so I had to do that later on. I've just figured it out while doing this round of shading. I make a lot of mistakes during my paint job. Then it's time for the cloth hanging around his body. Rhinox hide for the bottom part of the leather. What I like about the cover art is that they used different colors of brown, so it's kind of put together with rags they had lying around. So it's fun to use different colors for his leather cloth, which is what we're doing here. So I'm adding some red using Doomble Brown, which is still a believable cloth or leather color. I'm using these colors just straight from the pot, just slap it on there, and the details will be coming later. Third color I'm using is Mournfang Brown, which is also a nice leathery look, and those three colors, they really work together. Now the top part, the part above the rope holding it all together, is the inside of those leathers, and for that I'm using dried bark. It's kind of hanging over here, a little bit coming from under here. Now once this is dry, slap some Agrex Earthshade all around. You want this to be dirty, dark, and focus especially on those edges in between the colors, because you want some shading in there as well. Don't really worry about the rope, we're going to do that later on. Now for the rope, I'm retouching it with some gray cere. If you were able to keep it clean, it should be about as gray as you're seeing here. And I'm focusing on the top part, so the most reflective part, the brightest part, and retouching that with some gray cere, as I'm going to be using a contrast paint as a next step. So once this is done, it should look something like this. And again, the belly was a challenge to reach. Now once this is done, you can very easily go over it with Skeleton Horde, the same color we used on the catapult ropes. And this gives a nice bright look, and the darker parts instantly are darker when using contrast paints. That's the beauty of it. Next, with some Ushabti bone, we're painting these stitches in between those pieces of leather as well, just as we did with the larger black straps around his body. There is a lot of them, so take a seat, take your time, and pick out every single one. Also wash those with some Seraphim Sepia to make them dirtier and kind of blend in with the rest. Now it's time for some edge highlighting on those straps. I'm using pure Gorthor Brown, and on those edges kind of pull your paint in lines opposite of the edge direction to make it look a bit more worn, a bit more torn. That way you give it a bit of more of a worn look. Next I'm using Baneblade Brown on the base, which might seem weird, but I'm also going to be using a contrast paint over it, so I want to have some brightness and not gray on the base to start with. So bear with me, the result is going to be worth it. I'm covering it with Garagak Sewer afterwards, and I just slap some of that paint on, thin down your brush with some water and kind of smear that paint all over the base. It doesn't have to be the same consistency everywhere as normally soil or earth isn't. After which we're going to be dry brushing over it with some rock art flash, and then it's time to dress up that base with some foliage, some brushes, some rocks, some whatever you have lying around. I had already glued some rocks in there, so I'm just picking those out as well, but go nuts here, it's your base. And that's it for our troll. And there's the finalized result for our Gundabad Troll, the Catapult Troll. What a magnificent beast he is. Or she, I'm not really sure. Anyway, this was a lot of fun to paint, and I hope it was of any help to you guys. In the next clip you will see the troll with the catapult on top. For me this was a huge challenge to paint this guy, because these big units, they always terrify me tremendously, because you want to do it right, and I am very satisfied with my own result, so I hope this helps you too. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to my channel, and please also feel free to check out my Patreon page, as I'll be painting a lot of different games there. Some of them might hit the YouTube channel, some will be exclusively to Patreon. So I'd really appreciate it if you check that out. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!